Hi everyone, and welcome to this segment of the show called Domestic Violence Hotline. My name is Brenda Morales, and I am here on behalf of Connections for Abused Women and Their Children. I am a counselor advocate at the Greenhouse Shelter Program, part of Connections for Abused Women and Their Children. To start off today, I would like to invite all of our viewers to give me a call today at the number that you see below on the screen. I can answer any questions that you have about domestic violence, about CAWC, and anything that you may have regarding those issues, and I will answer them to the best of my ability. And if not, I will guide you to where you can get the answers to. So again, my name is Brenda, and I want to start off the show with talking about what is domestic violence exactly and what it entails. And so this is a very common question that everyone has because they either may know someone that is going through a domestic violence relationship, or they themselves are going through a domestic violence relationship. So domestic violence is when someone is trying to gain power and control over another person. And so by doing so, they commit these pattern of behaviors that are going to look like what I'm going to show you on this overhead. Okay, so this is the overhead. So to start off, you see that power and control is in the middle of the wheel because that is how people try and gain power and control over another person through physical abuse, by isolating someone, by committing emotional abuse against them, by economical abuse, which is something that oftentimes victims oversee or other people oversee as abuse. Economic abuse can be very detrimental to anyone going through violence because they may be threatening the person that they're not allowed to work or not to use their own money that they've gained through their own employment. Another way that victims suffer through domestic violence is through sexual abuse. So it is a very common misconception to believe that if you are married, you are not being sexually abused because that is your duty as a partner. But in fact, when someone is being sexually abusive towards you, they are forcing you to have sex with you against your will. Also, some victims have reported that they are being forced into prostitution, or that they are forced to do things in exchange for money from the abuser. Another way that victims suffer through domestic violence is by using their children against the victim. So for example, if an abuser threatens to take their children away from them and, for example, kidnap them so that they will never ever be able to see them again, or when an abuser threatens to report their children to, for example, immigration or ICE. Another example of being in an abusive relationship is when an abuser threatens a victim to report them to immigration so that they will be returned back to their country of origin, or even threatening to withdraw any immigration petitions that they have already worked towards. And so using their citizenship or their residency as privilege. And another way, which is most commonly seen, is physical abuse. Obviously, those are the kind of things that you can see on a victim. So if you see someone who is bruised. And then also using intimidation as a form of abuse. So hiding or destroying any important papers, for example, a passport, ID cards, healthcare cards, and destroying their property in general. Those are ways that an abuser can intimidate someone. So I wanted to also talk a little bit about some common misconceptions about domestic violence, and one of them is that the belief that there's only a very small percentage of the population that this affects, when in fact 1 in 4 women are affected by domestic violence, and it is the leading cause of injury to women, and usually from their intimate partner. And so this particular statistic only regards women, and so another misconception about domestic violence is that this only affects women. That is also not true at all. Domestic violence affects men as well, but it is reported at a different rate, and it does not mean that it is any less grave than violence against women. And so with that, I can answer another common question that people have. So who is at risk for domestic violence? And so a common misconception about who is at risk for domestic violence is that only poor, uneducated, and minority families are affected by domestic violence, but that in fact is not true. Domestic violence affects everyone regardless of age, gender identity, socioeconomic status, ethnicity, and religion, and any educational level. However, women from poor and minority groups are overrepresented. And since I'm inviting you to call and ask any questions that you have about domestic violence, or if you or anyone that you know is experiencing domestic violence, you can call and ask me a question right now. Again, my name is Brenda. Otherwise, I can provide you the phone number to Connections for Abused Women and Their Children. And so this is our 24-hour domestic violence hotline, where you can call at any time or day and someone will answer your phone call. If you speak any other language, we are happy to accommodate that as well. So if you want to pass this phone number on to someone that you may think or know is experiencing domestic violence, you can do so. Again, this hotline is open 24 hours a day, every day of the year, even on holidays. And so on the bottom is also our web site. So I invite you to, if it is safe for you, to visit our website where you will learn about our programs. And so I'm going to tell you a little bit about our programs right now, to see whether or not you're interested or would like to give someone this information. So CAWC has been around for more than 30 years, and it's a community-based organization, even though it serves everyone nationally as long as they're seeking services with us in the city. And not just the city, we can accommodate anyone who is seeking services as long as they can get to where we are. And so Greenhouse Shelter is one of their first programs and one of the first domestic violence shelters in Chicago. If you call the hotline number that I provided, and you or someone that you know is seeking shelter because they are in an abusive relationship and they want to be safe and they have children who they want to keep safe as well, then they are more than welcome to call. We would be able to provide you more information about our program. We are community-based, community living domestic violence shelter. Among the other programs at CAWC is also the Humboldt Park Outreach Program. And the Humboldt Park Outreach Program is just that. It provides outreach in the community, and it does not have to be solely based in Humboldt Park, but we are based in Humboldt Park. And we provide individual counseling, group counseling, and legal advocacy as well. So we also provide life skills training and goal setting, budgeting, and safety, both at all of our programs. We do provide some assistance in housing, income, employment, and educational information. We also provide legal advocacy, like I said, including court orders and immigration. And we always provide services for children who have been victims of domestic violence as well. And so I can move on to another of the most common myths about domestic violence is that children do not experience domestic violence and they're not affected by it. A lot of times we will hear parents say, well, my child is too young to understand what is happening. And children can really, it's quite the opposite, can really either energy gets transferred from a parent when they are in crisis and when they are in fear and when they feel like they're in danger. And so they do become aware, and even if they're not speaking yet, there are effects that they may have. Imagine, a parent holding their child so close and, being exposed to violence when they're holding their child so close, and what kind of energy that can transfer to a child. So studies show that in many cases when there's abuse at home, children are also physically abused, and they can suffer emotionally, cognitively, and developmentally as a result of witnessing domestic violence at home. And a lot of these children, because they have viewed domestic violence in their homes, they can also grow up to repeat that behavior as well. And so right now we have a phone call from someone. And caller, are you there?
Yes, and good evening, and thanks for taking this call. I'm just doing my work, and I've been listening to the things you were saying. There's something crazy just ran across my mind. You always hear people saying this. I don't know how true it is. I don't know any men personally, but you hear that men get abused by their spouse. So, do they have places for men, or do they join the women's? How do that work? And I'm just curious. And besides, you've been talking and you've been giving people good advice, and nobody don't never call in. So it's something to ask, just in case maybe another man need to hear this. Listen, sweetheart, thank you for taking this call.
Thank you
Let me
so
get
much
out
for
there so I can
calling.
hear your response.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that was a great question. And, you are absolutely right. And like I said before, women are not the only ones that experience domestic violence. Men experience domestic violence as well. It may not be as commonly known, or a common misconception that they are not, because it may not be reported as much, or we have, in society believe that the perpetrators of violence are only men, but men also experience domestic violence, whether it's perpetrated by a woman or by someone of their same gender identity. And so, in regards to the other part of your question, are there places for men who are experiencing domestic violence? So, for example, even though we are called Connections for Abused Women and Their Children, we are connections for everyone who is being abused, regardless of any gender identity or sexual orientation. So if you or anyone that you know is experiencing domestic violence and they identify as male or they identify as a female, they are more than welcome to call us, and we will gladly take their phone call and give them any information that we have that may be able to help them in their situation. So, and I would also like to say that all of our services are accessible to men and women as well. So if they call, they will not be turned away. They will receive the same quality of services as well. So in regards to counseling, shelter, legal advocacy, in all those regards. So thank you for calling again. And again, everyone, if you're watching right now and you have a question about domestic violence, as insignificant as you may think it may be, there may be someone out there who is thinking the same thing and is asking the same question to themselves, and I would gladly be able to answer that if I can. So, yeah. Going along, so now that we've talked about what kinds of abuse there are, who can experience domestic violence, and we've already established that it is non-discriminatory at all, that everyone can be affected by domestic violence of any gender identity, and children as well. So let's go through some ways that a victim of domestic violence can protect themselves. And so if someone calls our agency or is receiving services through our organization, one of the first things that we do when we answer that phone call, when you call our hotline, is determine whether you are in a safe place or not. If you are in a safe place, then we are happy to keep on talking to you. If you're not in a safe place, then we will start discussing a safety plan with you. So what are ways that you have that a victim has kept themselves safe, and what are ways that we can help them keep themselves safe. And so we will create a safety plan together in order to create safety for a family and their children. And so another way that victims can protect themselves is through the law. And so there is something called an order of protection, and what that means is a court order that states that the abuser cannot be abusive towards you. And there are a lot of specifics that I will not go into today, but if you have questions about an order of protection, then again, I invite you to either call me right now. We have a few more minutes left. Or if you want to jot down this phone number and you want to have a conversation with someone about who you can have a conversation with about an order of protection. So there are two kinds of orders of protection. Well, there's various kinds of orders of protection, but the first time that you go seek an order of protection is an emergency order of protection. That means it's an emergency, that you fear that your life is in danger or that your children's life is in danger, and you're petitioning to get this court order document to have that person stay away from you. And so after that, then both parties are given dates to go to court. And so if you or anyone that you know wants that kind of document to protect themselves, and this isn't to say that you automatically get this piece of paper and it's going to protect you. It works for some people and it doesn't work for everyone. But we will always give you the information that you need to be able to get one if that's what someone wants, because under the Illinois Domestic Violence Act, committing violence against another person who you are in an intimate relationship with, who you are in a relationship with, is against the law. And so a lot of the times victims feel like they are alone and they are not protected by anyone or anything. And so we want those people to know out there that they are, and that there are people who can help them protect themselves, along with themselves as well. And so the city of Chicago here has a domestic violence court, and they are located at 555 West Harrison. And so I know maybe right now this is a lot of information to process. So like I said, please call our hotline if you have any further questions about that. And another common misconception, now that we're talking about the law and orders of protection, is that people who are immigrants do not have a right to protect themselves in courts. That is a common threat that abusers give victims of violence, and that unfortunately many people believe, but I am here to tell you that that is not true. Being an immigrant of another country does not mean that the law cannot protect you. You have human rights, and you have rights under the Illinois Domestic Violence Act. And so we have another caller right now. So caller? Caller?
Yes, I do have a question to ask. My question was, I'm sure that a lot of the residents come from abusive homes. If any of the residents, since you are working at a domestic violence shelter, has any resident ever been abusive towards you in any way?
Um, has has anyone been abusive towards me? Was that the question?
Right, as one of the residents.
Yeah,
Um,
well, you know, I mean, I think that's a really good question too. I think that there are many reasons why victims of violence are angry, are at their situation, and if you think about it, when they have been victims of violence and they've been stripped of all of their belongings, their home, a sense of safety, that can bring up a lot of feelings in someone. And so, has someone been mean to me? Yes, of course. But I always remember that the job is not about me. And and so have I made a decision to be a domestic violence advocate and remember that, there are people less privileged than I am, then yes, that's what I've dedicated myself to. Thank you for that question.
no problem. I think that your response is fair.
Okay, so like I said, if you have any more questions, well, you are calling. So we have another question. Caller?
Hi.
Hi.
My question is is domestic violence only with my significant other or my boyfriend, or can it also be from family?
No, absolutely. That is a great question. So I did say intimate relationships, and then I said other relationships as well. So it does not have to be your significant other only. It can be a family member, it can be a friend, it can be a roommate, so someone that you're sharing a household with. It just means someone that you have a relationship with.
Okay.
Thank you for calling. All right, so I'm so happy that we had so many phone calls today. And again, if you have any more questions, I would like to give you the phone number to our hotline, where we can answer questions and have a whole conversation with you about anything that you may be going through. Like I said, it's a 24-hour domestic violence hotline, and if you're giving this phone number to someone who needs language accommodations, we have counselors who speak various languages. So if we don't, we will get access to them for you as well, and be able to hopefully be able to get a translator, because we want everyone to get this kind of information out to them. Just a few more things about domestic violence before we go. So if you are looking for domestic violence services in Illinois and you're watching right now in Chicago, please feel free to call our agency. And I want to thank you for joining me today and talking about domestic violence and for all of your questions. Thank you.